Not running yet.
Should be. Nobody's online, so.
Please help yourself. I don't know. There's enough room for everyone.
Okay, good morning. We'd like to welcome everybody here. It is 9:02. We're ready to start our work meeting for the San Juan County Commission session this day. We have members in the audience, those who are going to be presenting to us, and all three commissioners, Mac McDonald, our administrator, and Lyman Duncan, our clerk. So we do welcome everybody here on a beautiful day and hope we can get some good things done. So first on our agenda today is we'd like to welcome the San Juan County Historical Commission, and they're here to give us some updates and whatever else you want to tell us. So if you'll introduce yourselves when you come to the mic so that we have the public record indicating who you are and what you're here for.
All right, I'm Nancy Kimmerly. I'm the president. Donna Jensen is the vice president, and Heather Razor is the big workhorse. So I put an agenda of what we wanted to cover, our projects, because you do help fund us. The first order of business is this is a list of everyone on the commission right now, and it needs to, from our notes, it needs a formal approval from you. There's really no term limit or anything. It's like people come in and out as their interest and their family situation.
Well, let's take care of that right now.
Okay.
Well, you got to do it in a commission meeting.
Okay, oh yeah, that's right. We got to do it.
I'll follow up with you. I think I have most everybody on here.
Okay, I have everyone here. We're still working on someone from Bluff. They haven't agreed yet.
The only one that I don't see is Bailey Hedgeland.
She is not on.
Okay.
She's the mayor, and that's taking her time.
Okay. I'll switch it up and we'll have it on a commission meeting. for
Okay.
appointment.
Okay, thank you.
We'll get it approved.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll just go in order of our projects. Heather will talk about the first two.
Okay, so I just wanted to let you know what's happening with the photo collection. The San Juan County Historic Commission has collected over 10,000 photos from different people in the county. Mostly it's donations. People will bring books in and say, I have some pictures that would be of interest to people in the county, and then we scan them and digitize them and give them back. Some families just say, none of anybody in the family wants these, and they'll just bring boxes of books and leave them. And so we try to get everything digitized and into the collection. Corinne Royne and Ron McDonald did a lot of the work. John Felmuth did a lot. There are others that do a lot of the scanning and digitizing for them. Corinne got some of hers online through a program called Past Perfect that is paid for out of county dues every year. And we want to be able to stop that so you don't have to keep paying yearly. And with the advances that have been made in technology, we would like to get the entire collection online instead of just the few that we have at this point. And discussions with USU Logan Libraries, they have agreed to host the collection. And so we're just working on doing the preliminary work, which is typing in all the metadata for each picture, which is dates, names, locations, all that information on an Excel spreadsheet. Then we send it to them, and then they will do the other work to get it online. When that's complete, we'd like to ask the San Juan County.gov site to put a link on our site so that people in the county can click on that link, and it will be a searchable database that's free for all the people of the county, that they'll be able to look for pictures of their families. The photos that we have that are the originals are housed in a room at the edge of the Cedars Museum. I don't know if any of you know that the county paid for one room in that museum for us to house our collections. And so as well as photos, it also houses historical books and documents, diaries, biographies, things like that, that people have donated to the commission. let's see, we've been working since February typing in metadata, and we've got about 2,000 of the photos ready. So this is going to be a long time, probably a year, before we have it available online for the people to have access to. And let me tell you, there's been a lot of miracles as we worked on this, as I'm a librarian at USU, and I've had a student come in one day and glance over at my computer and said, "What are you doing with a picture of my grandfather down in Monument Valley? That's over by Old Jado." I mean, and it was one of the unidentified photos. We have a lot of those that we don't know who they are. They were taken, some of them are 1800s. And he was able to give me the identity of the people and the location where it was and more information like that. So that has happened enough multiple times that I feel like there's more going on with a hand of God involved in this somehow, because I'll just happen to have a picture up as somebody walks in and says, "Hey, that's my family." I have a friend with last name Mustache. I found a picture with a Mustache family. I sent that to him, and he said, "That's my grandfather. Where did you get that? We don't have a picture of him." And he says, "Can you find the rest of my family?" And I said, "I don't know. What's their name?" And he said, "Benali." And I thought, "Oh, Benali Jones Smith." Well, probably not. And I did a search and came up with a family of Benalis from down by Bluff and sent that to him. And he said, "That is my great-grandfather and great-grandmother. And these are their names." And he says, "I've seen that picture one time before, and I don't know who else has it." He says, "I've never seen it since then." And so he's excited. So we've got a lot of people that will be really excited to be able to look at this database and type in names and do the searches to find their families. And the other part of this I want to talk about is the identification, because a lot of the books that were dropped off are not identified. And especially for like our Native American families, they didn't have cameras in the 1800s and early 1900s. And so the pictures that were taken were like Albert R. Lyman standing with a group of Native children or something. And so we've taken those to different people to see if they can give us identifications. And of course, a lot of it's really hard because there's nobody, I don't know what my grandmother looked like in 1903, and so some of it we may never be able to identify, but we're trying our best. And Gail Shumway has talked with Sam on Record about putting pictures in the paper. And so if you've looked at the Sam on Record, there'll be a photo that says, "Does anybody know who these people are?" And then they call me, and we're able to get some of those people identified so that we'll have that information on the database when it comes up. As well as that, she's also taken photos around to some of the older people in the community and had them look through and identify people. And other people have come into my office, and I just snag whoever comes in and says, "Hey, come look at this photo for a minute. We have, what's your last name, Perkins? Okay, come look at these Perkins photos and tell me if you know who these people are. Oh, you're a Bailey? Come look at some of the Bailey. Here's a Barton collection. Here's the Adams collection." And they look through and they're excited about it. So we're excited that it will, once we get this major work done, that it'll be a searchable database available to everyone in the county.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Heather, I have watched you through the years, and lots of people, they have time on the computer, they get in Amazon or different things, and every time I go, you are working on this project. Every spare moment that you and your staff or workers around you, and it's a work, a lab, a labor lab, and so it's, you have sacrificed your time on Facebook or whatever to do this for the whole community. Thank you.
That's true. And Christian Olson, who's at Utah State, he's given permission for her to use her time on this project just so she gets her other work done. So they've been very cooperative.
And it's been for years and years. Mm-hmm.
Okay, there is a courthouse safe just down the hall, and I believe it was Corinne Roaring stored some things in there, and it was locked. And we got it unlocked. Was it just this spring?
Yes.
Just this spring. And Heather Young has made an inventory. So let me explain. This handout is showing the kind of pictures that Heather's collecting and the metadata, how they're putting on the metadata for the pictures. The next page, I just did one page for you. It's like 10 pages of an inventory of what's in that safe. And it's like court records, handwritten, immigration record, pictures, Blue Mountain records. There's just a ton of things in there that Heather's inventoried. And then we're in the process summer is a family time. So it's now we're going to move that collection over to the museum. It's got to be put in a cold storage and then put into our room. And then we'll evaluate what the Historical Commission should do with that information from there. So there's a partial list showing what's been inventoried. Okay, the next project, the Founding Blanding Residence. So I live in a historic house in Blanding. I grew up in Denver, and I found myself thinking, how do you start a frontier town? Blanding was started in 1905. How do you start a frontier town? And I've learned they just came up on the mesa and surveyed it and started living there. And there were some problems that happened, but Evelyn Bayless, I thought, who were her neighbors? So this project has mushroomed and trying to identify where did people live, why did they come here, and did they stay or not? So this project, there's 4 or 5 of us working on it. We're trying to get histories of each person that came by 1920, where they lived, and a photo. Kind of put it in one grouping. So that's the project. And the story that I put in your folder is about Edward Partridge Lyman and Irene. Now, Irene was 9 years old when her uncle, Albert R. Lyman, camped out on April 2nd, 1905. And you think how cold it is in April. They were all living in tents. So it's the first family that came to Blanding, and she's the little sister of his wife, Lil. And then before the year was over, his uncle Walter came, his uncle Jody came, and 2 other families. So you have 5 families up on the mesa. You imagine how quiet and just started the community. And that's what intrigued me. How do you start a community? That's what started that project. Okay, the next project, the San Juan County Commissioners. Okay, that's this handout right here. So Mac asked us, when we went in, we asked him what would he like us to do, and he said he would like to have pictures of all the county commissioners historic displayed here in the courthouse. So I got Gail Johnson. She used to work here. She compiled this list and the years when everyone served, and then Heather and we've been calling and trying to find pictures for everyone.
So we need a new building for all those pictures.
That's right.
I was thinking on the walls in here, place them up 2 by 2. Yeah. Do something.
So that's what we're working on. We're probably 2/3 done, thanks to Gail. And she's had cancer this year, so it's really been a labor of love for her. And she calls me every few days about something. And I think I've called each of you and asked for a photo also.
And my comment was that we want a professional picture. I wasn't
so I
going to
think
give
so,
her
too.
one picture, but we are working on that.
Yep.
So
that's that project. All right, Donna, we'll talk about the next couple projects.
I'm Donna Jensen. I know pretty much all of you. And Jamie and I have actually worked quite closely and on projects when he was on the board. With that in mind, going along with Native American with Jamie, as it mentions here that we realize what's lacking big time is our histories on Native American. So Bev Black's been busy, and John Knockeye and Susanna have come on. And we're trying to figure out the best way. Part of the problem, correct me if I'm wrong, Jamie, histories of the Native American, they can write it, but once they're dead, it's harder to share those and to keep those. And so that's been we're trying to still work and see how we can get history so those people can be alive and show that what they contribute in their family and the community. However, we've gone through the Blue Mountain Shadows and collected histories there. Some we'll use, some we want ones that are positive. The schools in the past have had histories written by the students about the grandparents. So we have those. And then this year, the schools again are going to have the students write their histories, and then we'll work it out where we're going to put them, how we're placing them. So I think some good things are coming out on that one. I'm on the board of the Hole in the Rock, and there's a whole list in the book of who came through the Hole in the Rock, whether it's the first time through, second time through. But I don't think this list is complete, and they've been researching a lot. John Roaring, my first cousin and son of Perrine, has been going through and has come up with a list of PIDs. He's still short of 35. And this is going through the family search. And so my goal that I'm working with people is to see if we can have a history of all the line on web, a history of everybody that came through. We've been collecting, the web has been collecting from the board years of ancestors from, or the main pioneer that came through. So there are histories that are written about them, but it's not complete. So that's it.
Can I make
Thanks,
a comment? I work at the Family History Center in Blanding, and we are doing some Native American family gathering. And we've been working with 3 different tribes, and different tribes have different beliefs, when it comes to the ancestors, and some pictures, one of the group don't want to see pictures. It's very taboo for them to see that. And so trying to still gather history by talking to them and trying to record some of the stuff a little bit at a time. Now it's trying to gather the families, who is who. That's and wonderful. What's what. And it's just like you say, the miracles that come from finding. There was a box there. There was a box that somebody dumped everything as they clear a desk for the last time. And the little piece of paper written by Abraham Lyman about different families and different little information. And for the last few years, we've been pasting and gathering that information. So someday I'll come together, pictures and history. So.
And are those pictures allowed to come and be part of our website?
Yeah, and we do have a copy of those pictures that you guys have there at the center. So
Okay, that's great. Thanks for your call.
thank you.
Okay, you can see we have a big committee. Okay, so the next thing is that Art Rogers had an artifact collection, cowboy things, and that's now, it was in the visitor center. They've moved it to the basement, and Winston just needs time to get over there and finish inventorying that collection. The Swallow's Nest is that little house behind the visitor center in Blanding where Albert R. Lyman did his writing. And the way they built it and then put cement sidewalk around it, it funnels all the water into the house structure. And so they're working on funding and things through the city to take care of that. And the last thing we're currently working on, and I put this in your handout, this is a list of all the things that are on the U.S. Historic Collection, historic places and listings in San Juan County. And so another thing is if anyone has suggestions for buildings or places that are not on this that should be recognized and protected. That is what we need help with. That's what we're spending money on and time, and we're all volunteer as far as time goes. The people that we have a couple people that are helping do the scanning and the entering the information, and they are getting paid, but everyone else it's our hobby.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Any?
Do you know, can you tell me what the funding is that you get from the county?
$5,000 for the year. Last year we somehow lost part of that, but we're not. we could be more aggressive in spending that, like for the Swallow's Nest, if we have permission.
So every year in November, we prepare our budgets. And so if there's, specific need for you guys, either continuation of the 5,000 or an increase a little bit, be sure and get a hold of Mac and let him know what you're thinking.
Okay, there'll be something for frames for the
Yeah,
county
so-
commissioner project,
Yeah,
so.
when I looked the other night, I think we were only like $300 spent of the 5,000 this year. We've got 3 months left, and so a lot of it, the Blue Mountain Shadows publication would come out of that, as well as the software. So there's things that I think that haven't hit the books yet, and I don't know if you're doing a new Blue Mountain Shadows publication on there.
I guess before I took over, they kind of counseled that, but we're thinking like the Blanning Resident Project and maybe even what we find in the safe, maybe we'll resurrect that project. I wasn't on board. I wasn't part of this during that season.
Yeah,
Well,
that's.
part of the
that's
problem is
tough.
our grant ran out.
Oh, okay.
There was a grant with the Blue Mountain Shadows. And along with the Swallow's Nest, we referred a grant to the planning city to come up with that would have come up with 25,000 to stabilize the Blue Mountain, the Shadows. But they didn't get it. So if there's a grant that you're not going to use, that maybe
Okay.
we could.
Well, I think the state has grants for historical purposes.
Absolutely, yes.
And so that might be something you want to try and tap in on as well.
Okay, and we were ineligible for that because
Were you?
last year's money, Bob McPherson had done the Ojeto Trading Post.
Correct.
And that was
And we can only
$10,000.
get it every other year.
Okay, so then this next year would be perfect.
hmm
Okay.
Okay.
We
Okay.
like your work and we appreciate your
Yeah.
volunteerism, and we're supportive in every way we can be, and including financially, and we want to see you succeed and tell the stories of these people that we love and appreciate for all their sacrifices coming to settle San Juan County. You're all part of that. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, next on our agenda is Mitch, you and Lynn have been working on a project from our last meeting.
Yeah, I think
Lynn, take over. Okay.
take over now.
Okay, don't get too comfortable back there, Mitch.
Hasn't signed in yet.
I'm supposed to text him when he's up, I guess it's now.
Okay.
So this is going to be kind of a bifurcated presentation. I'm going to focus on short-term rentals in the Spanish Valley residential area or district. And then at the end, Mitch has been working with Mac on the larger issue of the plats,
Right.
subdivision plats. So I'll be turning it over to him. So we were here a month ago on the 8th of August, and the entire work meeting was focused on short-term rentals in the Spanish Valley residential district. At the end of that meeting, I raised my hand and said, why don't we bring you back an enforcement plan? So
Yeah.
we're reporting back what we said we were going to do.
Okay.
What's happened in the last month is Bart Kuntz, Mitch, Mon, and myself have been literally having meeting after meeting. I reached out in Salt Lake County to the county attorney's office in Salt Lake County, who deals with short-term rentals a lot, and talked to their attorney who deals with it. And there were two other attorneys that deal with short-term rentals at the ski resort towns. So I've spent literally a month interacting with them. I learned a lot about how to put an evidence case together for short-term rentals, much of which I didn't know. So I've shared that with Mitch and Bart. Mitch and Bart have also we have talked about some legislative and other options, which we're going to talk to you about. But let me kind of summarize our discussion on the 8th of August so you can kind of have it as context. So 2017, 2018, the county hired Landmark Design to do a public engagement for what the future of Spanish Valley should look like, and it ended up with an area plan, the Spanish Valley Area Plan. The gist of that plan was that Spanish Valley presents lots of opportunities, not only for Spanish Valley, but for the county. Lots of commercial, mixed use, and other activities can go on there that are going to benefit tax-wise and community support-wise the larger San Juan County. Having said that, it was pretty strong in the area plan and in the public engagement that the residential component, which is a smaller segment of Spanish Valley, was going to be off limits for tourist enterprises, including short-term rentals. And so over a year and a half, an ordinance was drafted and eventually approved for Spanish Valley development ordinances, which was approved in November 2019. That ordinance, again, allowed lots of development, mixed use, short-term rentals in 5 of the 6 zoning districts, but in 1, the residential, off limits for any of those activities. It was just strictly residential, and, churches and parks and the kind of things that support a residential community, but no tourist or other enterprises. An important part of the discussion last month was the exchange between Commissioner Adams and myself. He says, well, I didn't vote for it, which raises an important issue here. The Spanish Valley Development Ordinances is a living ordinance, okay? You 3 commissioners can decide to change it. Okay, if you feel that short-term rentals are appropriate for the residential area, you can amend the ordinance. Okay, so you need to be thinking about that. Our assumption right now is that the commission then and the commission now supports no short-term rentals or overnight accommodations or similar things in the residential area. But if you feel differently, you have the ability to make the change. The other thing that you may want to consider is the size of the residential zone. And you talked about the map problem. Before it was presented to the commission, there was back and forth on what size the various zones should look like. Maybe that needs to be revisited. Maybe the size of the residential zone needs to be modified. That's something that's in your hands and you can take care of. We're not going to make a recommendation. I'm not even inviting you to do that. But if you feel you need to revisit that in this context, you're surely able to do that. That's a legislative matter that's clearly within your prerogative. At the end of the presentation on the 8th of August, Mac raised the question about a current issue with approving subdivision plats. And his concern was, in the plat approval process, am I just creating more problems for myself by opening the door for more residential or more short-term rentals in the Spanish Valley area? And we've worked on that. We have a specific recommendation. In fact, Mitch is going to spend quite a bit of time talking about that. So between last time and this time, we worked together. We've gone back and forth. I've reached out to other attorneys. One of the things that we talked about bringing back to you, which we're not bringing back to you, was an amnesty ordinance. Yeah. And the 3 attorneys went back and forth. We drafted it and we criticized it and went back and forth. And at the end of the day, we feel there's some legal risk associated with an amnesty ordinance, where I won't go into the details of that, but the reality is we're not recommending that to you. The reality is the early short-term rental property owners still have a remedy. They can come in front of me as administrative law judge and seek what's called zoning estoppel. In other words, I can rule that the county's stopped or prevented or barred from enforcing the ordinance against them because of certain equities that occurred early in the process. I currently have 2 cases in front of me that are largely zoning estoppel cases. And within the next 2 months or so, I'll make a decision. If I find that those property owners invested money, relied upon in good faith, assurances from the county that they could develop a short-term rental, then I'm going to allow them to operate. Probably with conditions. It won't be a, open door to do whatever you want, but it's potentially. And other property owners that, again, right after, between November 2019 and March of 2021, when the county attorney's office issued its formal opinion, anywhere in there, if somebody's out there financing, building, erecting properties for short-term rentals, and they come forward and can establish a case of zoning estoppel, then they can operate. So that remedy is available to those who want to do it. Now, it's my understanding, in fact, I'll look at Mitch over here. The 2 cases I have right now were actually encouraged by the county attorney to come to me. There was actually a process reason for me not to hear it, but the county attorney waived the procedural barriers to allow it to be heard. And so similarly, if there were others out there, the county attorney would probably open the door for that kind of analysis. So there's 4 items on your agenda. I'm going to go through the 4, one of which has Mitch's name on it, but I'll proceed with my portion of it and then turn it over to him. Mac? Maybe they already have this, but if you could have that in front of them. So the first thing has to do with these subdivision plat approvals. Again, on the 8th of August, Mac says, well, what about approving these plats with the potential that individual lots could be used for short-term rental? I went back and looked at the Utah Code and also your own subdivision ordinance. This is what I learned. The Utah Code places, and I'm going to give you a short version of this, places an affirmative responsibility on the counties to make sure that when they approve a plat, that the approval is consistent with the existing ordinances. And they have a right to ask questions and to take action to make sure that the plat approval at the end of the day isn't going to create a violation or a conflict with the existing ordinances. And I won't go into all the I have I'm a typical attorney. I write down all this stuff. I don't need to go all through that with you. Having said that, we've talked to Mac and Mitch and I have gone back and forth. What we're going to recommend, at least as it relates to short-term rentals, we're going to recommend to Mac that as he's interacting with these applicants for short-term or for subdivision plats, that they be informed that if the plat is in the Spanish Valley residential district or in the A1 district where short-term rentals are also prohibited, that there's going to be a notice on the plat. A notice on the plat is a pretty significant event, by the way. If you put a notice on a plat that something's expected or prohibited, then subsequent title searches have to go back to that plat. And financing, a whole bunch of other things are impacted by an effective notice. And so going forward, we're going to encourage Mac as he works with these applicants to make sure that's on there. Now, that's a very small portion of it. Mitch is going to come up later and talk about kind of the larger plat approval process. The language, let me go ahead and read it here. Again, it's going to be on the plat. Under zoning in effect at the time of plat approval, use of these properties for short-term rentals, overnight accommodations, bed and breakfasts, lodging houses, or any other variation of overnight accommodations for nightly rentals is prohibited. So it's going to be on the record. One of the things that we ask you to do as a commission, so these preliminary and final plats go to the Planning Commission and they come to you. Do not vote on any of these plats unless you see this language. And hopefully both the county attorney's office and MAC are not going to give you something that doesn't have that language. But you're the last safeguard to make sure this happens. You should not be approving any of these plats, again, Spanish Valley Residential or A1, unless this language is in there.
But if they're in a zone where overnight accommodations is okay, they don't have to.
Right, right, absolutely. It's only in those where it's prohibited.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely. Any questions on that? Actually, that's pretty straightforward. It was one of those, everything that we're bringing to you was a process, by the way. The smartest guy I know is not the smartest guy. Among the smartest people I know is Bart Kuntz. And much of what I'm giving you, and at the end of the day, it was Bart Kuntz doing a really good job of drafting. So my hat's off to Bart Kuntz.
Something so simple but so good.
Right.
You know, it's a good stop sign.
That's right. Well, but it wouldn't even have happened except for Mac raising the question last time. I'm not sure that was on my radar screen, Mac. It was obvious to you, but it wasn't necessarily obvious to me. The next thing that we haven't got ready to present to you, but we hope to have literally by the end of the week, and I'll explain the context, is remember my discussion with you about the Spanish Valley residential district, that short-term rentals are prohibited because of prohibition by omission and prohibition by exception. There's no express language in there saying thou shalt not operate and build a short-term rental. We arrive at it as an attorney through an indirect process. It's not mentioned, so it's prohibited. It's by definition, a family and a dwelling exclude short-term rentals, but there's no express language. So we as attorneys thought about, well, there needs to be express language in that chapter dealing with the Spanish Valley Residential District. So I've done a first draft. Bart is working on taking this language and included it in an amendment to the Spanish Valley Residential Ordinances that he will bring back to you. The process will be the Planning Commission meets on the 14th of this month. We're hoping to have a recommended ordinance change to them because gets a land use, has to go through them first on the 14th of this month, and then early next month at probably your first commission meeting in October, you could consider that and after public comment, adopt it. This is the language we're talking about inserting in the appropriate place in the Spanish Valley Residential District. Upon the creation of the Spanish Valley Residential District and the Spanish Valley Development Ordinances, it was the express intent of the San Juan County Board of Commissioners to prohibit short-term rentals, lodging houses, bed and breakfast, short-term visitor housing, all other variations of overnight accommodations intended for nightly rentals, or any other land use not named in Table 1 of Chapter 1 of the Spanish Valley Development Ordinances. So now that makes it express rather than prohibited by omission, prohibited by exception. It's now express. The concern was we want to make sure that we tied it back to the original adoption and not a new requirement. And that's why Mac actually raised that question, and we've been working to make sure that this language states the legislative intent in November 2019, not a new intent on behalf of this commission. Does that frame it correctly? Bart has volunteered I actually did an early draft of an ordinance change. He's going to take my draft and improve upon it. And again, hopefully by the end of the week, if we need to get it to the Planning Commission on the 14th, Mac, when do we need to get it to you?
This weekend, so Thursday, Friday.
Okay.
Friday packet.
So we'll try to get it to you by close of business on Thursday. If Bart can't get it to you by then, or we can't get it to you, then we have to roll it into next month because the Planning Commission only meets once a month.
Yes,
but
correct.
we're going to try to get it to you for this month.
Okay.
Any questions on that? That's more of a finesse solution, but we thought it was important to have more specific language in the actual code itself. Any questions? Yes.
I have a question regarding the language, the underzoning in effect, the dark language. That's the language that has not been established yet, but will be inserted, right?
Yes.
Or does it
What
exist?
happens when a legislative body adopts something? You have the express language, and then you have the legislative intent. And so sometimes we as attorneys trying to figure out what you really wanted to accomplish have to go into the legislative record. What you're doing is pulling out of the legislative record and putting in the ordinance the legislative intent. So it's written into the ordinance rather than kind of in the background. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Mitch, is that a good explanation? And
I like this language as well because we in the future may change the zoning, yet you would still have that plat, and so things may change in the future. And so, but right now, this makes them pay attention that right now it's not allowed.
Okay. And this is our authority as commissioners, as we can adopt this language, and this language won't have to go. Will it have to go through the planning commission first?
it's an amendment to a land use ordinance under state law. You, as a legislative body, cannot consider changes, amendments, or adoption of anything that affects land use unless it goes through the Planning Commission. So they hear it first and decide whether they want to recommend it to you, and then if recommended, it comes to you with whatever instruction or support or challenges or concerns they have. So, and Mitch, are you the attorney for the Planning Commission? You work with them?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So Mitch will be in the middle of that. So the next one we went back and forth on, and I'm not sure that we have come up with exactly what we need to do. So the challenge here is to create a possible sanction that will be considered more than just a cost of doing business for an owner of a short-term rental. So if a short-term rental is 2 or 3 bedrooms, the nightly fee is probably $250, $350 in that range, a nightly fee. Okay. Some of these short-term rentals in Spanish Valley are larger than that. Some of the plans I've seen are 4 and 5 bedrooms or 4 and 5 bathrooms. That size of an overnight rental can cost $750, $1,000, $1,200 a night. We went back and looked at the sanctions in your current code and asked ourselves, are they sufficient? These are the 2 sanctions. Number 1, under my authority, administrative appeal, I can sanction up to $200 a day. And one stay at night in a nightly rental is a single violation. Okay, so I can impose up to $200 for a night, illegal night against the property owner. $200 is pretty significant if you're collecting $250 or $350, but it's not that much if you're collecting $1,000 or $1,200. And so, okay, so
They can say I can pay the
yeah, I'll just pay it and continue to do whatever I want to do. Business licensing has a $1,000 a month sanction, and that applies if they're operating a business illegally in the middle of the Spanish Valley residential. They can be sanctioned up to $1,000 a month. I think at this time it's too early for us to determine whether the sanctions that are on the record are going to be effective or not. Let's get through some of these early cases and look and see whether or not it's going to be meaningful or not. If I start recommending or tweaking this thing and we're wrong again, then we're wrong again. Let's get some experience under our belt. And Mitch will tell you, and we're going to talk in a few minutes about this, there's other remedies out there. If, for example, and these notices of violation come to me. So I'm the first one as the administrative law judge or code enforcement hearing officer. That's actually the title I'm talking about. That's what I'll be doing. If I get a resistant property owner that I know could care less about the notices of violation paying the fine, there's other remedies the county attorney's office have. They can go into district court and seek an injunction to stop all illegal activity. And that's an option. Another one was a criminal sanction. Under the land use code, they can be taken to criminal court for a Class C misdemeanor. And now Class C misdemeanor is probably the same as a $200 fine. It's just the cost of doing business. But still, there's remedies that we have out there that can be used and deployed. So at this point, we're not recommending any changes in the existing ordinance regarding sanctions, but we may, after a period of time, come back to you. The last item is a result of discussion last time. I think it was, who was the individual who was here? James Tibbetts. Spoke at the end of the last meeting, and there was also in your collection last time was a 7 June 2023 petition from residents of the San Juan Estate subdivision indicating that there were 14 or more short-term rentals in their subdivision. So we've gone back and forth about how to address not only the neighbors' concerns, but also the larger issue of enforcement. Let's see, did Lyman get one?
Yeah, this is it. This is the one.
This presentation is going to take a little bit more time, and I really want as much feedback and questions on this. So it's not like I was telling you not to focus on my previous one, but this is really important because this is fundamentally the enforcement strategy we recommend to you. And there's some decisions that you and Mac are going to have to make on this that make it operational or not. But let me step back. So your code currently places an affirmative obligation on the county attorney to make sure that the entire code is being complied with in the county. So the county attorney is supposed to look out there. Now, there's also a couple of provisions in the code where the county commission can say, county attorney, pay attention to this and make sure this is happening. So, the county attorney's not out there on their own, but with commission support, they can say, we want to focus on this. So that's in the code already. The challenge in code enforcement is the case, the evidence. So if you haven't got the evidence and you haven't put a case together, it's hard to move forward to a notice of violation, going to district court, or doing anything else. So you got to put a case together. And as Mac has told you, and we've told you before, there's at least one limitation in the state code. The state code says local governments cannot use the advertising on a website for short-term rentals. So that going on to Airbnb and any other website and lifting the information out, we can't use that. Off the table. Does that mean that we're hamstrung? Absolutely not. When I was talking to my friends in Salt Lake County and in the ski resorts, they said, oh no, there's lots of things that you can do. And they put them down. And I have created kind of a template of how to put an evidentiary case together for a short-term rental enforcement. I am not going to share that with you because it's investigative in nature, and the county attorney can use it in putting a case together. I don't want to go on record saying this is what we're going to do. But having said that, I can give you some assurance. There's lots of ways that we can gather appropriate information and get it in front of a decision body. One of them that raised its head last time with James Tibbetts is what can we do with citizen complaints or neighbors' complaints? And we went back and forth about how to handle that. And our recommendation is this form right here. Let me go through it with you in some detail. This is a complaint by a property owner, citizen of San Juan County, of alleged illegal short-term rental. This complaint form is going to be posted on the county's website in several places. It's going to be under the county attorney's place. I think there's a how to it portal. There's like 3 or 4 portals where this can be made available. The opportunity here is for a neighbor to file a complaint with evidence, with photographs, with a lot of detail with the county attorney's office. So this isn't going to come to you as a commission. It's not going to go to MAC. It's going to go to the county attorney's office. The privacy of the alleged person is protected. We're not going to put the person who's making the complaint on the record. Having said that, there may be time in the process where we may need to ask the complaining party to speak up in court or whatever, and that's a negotiation or decision between the county attorney's office and the complaining person. But the complaint can be filed. I'm telling you that a neighbor complaining is very helpful. It isn't necessarily the only piece of evidence we need, but it's very, very helpful. This gives an opportunity for those neighbors who feel that there's, illegal activity or other stuff going on. We did have an earlier version of this that allowed them to complain about nuisance activity. You heard Tibbetts talk about, late night and all the vehicles running around. That's a nuisance activity, not a violation of the zoning code. That's different. We felt, as your attorneys, that we wanted to focus the attention on the illegal activity under the zoning code rather than doing the nuisance. That doesn't mean that they couldn't complain about nuisance activity, and it could be, in fact, enforced, but the intent here is to go directly to the actual existence of the activity in the neighborhood. So this is pretty straightforward. Any questions? I mean, we felt this is what you wanted. This, as a result of James Tibbetts being here, we thought this would be helpful to the community. We don't have to do this. We can try to do some other thing, but this is...
It's very helpful.
Okay. Okay.
Well, during the Lincoln dinner here in Monticello, I had 3 citizens from the Spanish Valley talked about this concern. But you can see the stress that they feel because it affects the neighborhood when we have spies and storytellers. But you can see the frustration. I haven't worked with an organization where you had to report children molestation and then I was never protected. It's kind of scary when you have people mad at you and things like that. And it's bad for a neighborhood when you don't feel safe, you feel like people are spying on you.
Right.
But, this is a form. The only concern I would have if in the end they have to come and testify, because it's not good for a neighborhood to feel like your neighbors are watching, taking pictures, and
one way
they
to...
may be able to curtail them from doing. And I like that because I think the best thing we can do with this kind of situation is we're not going to hit them in the pocket because they are making, they can, 2 nights can go for the fines or whatever. But it is it has multiple concerns, First, they're breaking the law. Secondly, the way I see it, I passed yesterday that area and I always drive through and trying to learn more. It's fire hazard as they put in more and more trail. if it's a fire break there, I thought how we get to them with the way
Right,
the roads
right.
are. So
Yeah, the road structure through there
Yeah.
is not,
and you
doesn't
have
provide
like
for
a
easy
strange-
accessibility, that's for sure.
And if you have children and you have family and you have lots of strangers coming to your neighborhood, I would be, as a mother, I would be worried about us feeling safe, my children being safe. So it's lots of more concern than them not paying or whatever. So
Okay.
I think this is a good start. The part I don't like is that they may have to come and testify. Because-
Well, let me talk about that. As a practical matter, maybe none of them will ever have to testify. Let me explain the process. So what we have to do first is put a list of target properties together. And there's multiple ways of doing that. But through this process, the neighbors get to tell us which ones are operationally short-term rentals. Okay? Then we start putting a case file together. And at the end of the day, we may be able to have all the evidence we need without the citizen's complaint. Okay, I'm not telling you every time that's what it's going to look like, but the reality is the citizen's complaint gets the process started, but at the end of the day, we may have more than enough information. It's preponderance of the evidence, which is 51% of what you need. This is not case beyond a reasonable, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. This is, have you got enough reasonable evidence to move forward? And I think we have various opportunities to gather information, including, but also sometimes even excluding these complaints.
You
So,
can see which properties target
right,
more, who is, people.
right. Anyway, so with your, this does not require a vote or anything, but absent any objections or concerns with you, I think we want to work with MAC to get this posted this week or as soon as possible. Let me talk about, and I want to spend a little bit of time talking about creating a case. And you're very familiar with this in law enforcement. So a deputy sheriff will gather evidence. He or she will look at the code, and then they'll put a case together, and it gets referred to the county attorney. The same process is involved in code enforcement. In fact, it's almost identical. I was a city attorney for 8 years for the city of South Salt Lake. We had 5 or 6 code enforcement officers at any point in time. And the reason for that was this is in a pretty intense, challenged urban area south of downtown Salt Lake City. It's called South Salt Lake. And there was repeated, constant code violations in every neighborhood on every single street. And so the mayor and the city council decided they wanted to do this. And I put it together. I was the city attorney that created code enforcement, and I helped train and supervise the code enforcement function. What I was looking for in a code enforcement officer, a case person, was pretty much the same thing as a law enforcement person. Somebody who could read the code, somebody who effectively could go out into a neighborhood and observe and also interact. One of the challenges with a lot of, and I love all public employees, but some public employees don't necessarily have the skill set to talk to neighbors and to go through a neighborhood without creating an explosion, And so you want somebody who can do that. And at the end of the day, be able to put an effective case package together for possible enforcement. And so Mac and I have talked about what that looks like, and maybe Mac can talk to you about what his thoughts is. But it seems to me in order for this to happen, we need to find somebody, either a deputy sheriff off duty or deputy sheriff part-time or a retired law enforcement person. And we're talking about maybe 10 hours a week. This is for this particular function. This isn't like a full-time job or even a half-time job, but 10 hours a week, have this person start working on putting cases together, evidentiary packages together on these short-term rentals. and working under the direction of the county attorney's office. If this function doesn't happen, commissioners, I don't see how enforcement is really going to happen, because you have to have evidentiary packages. And how that's going to look, Mac, and have you given it some thought? What are your thoughts about that?
I don't know. Let me preface this by saying, kind of reiterating your statements, is if we have enforcement rules in our ordinances and we don't enforce them, that is worse off than the enforcement side of it, because basically your ordinance really have no merit or standing without that enforcement, because we've listed it there. So because it is, we have to.
Let me footnote that, and we've talked about that. There's actually a legal defense against non-compliance with an ordinance. And if I have a case in front of me and they can show that the county is not enforcing that ordinance, then they win. they can do whatever they want.
Yes, and so that probably worries me at the most part. And it's, we do have like Jerry McNeely in Spanish Valley. Is it, something that we can task him with that? He's always kind of been our eyes and ears in Spanish Valley, but he's strictly in Spanish Valley. We also have this problem outside of Spanish Valley, and so the anticipation of this individual going further beyond Spanish Valley is real, and it needs to be. But I do like that idea of having a part-time. Originally, my thoughts were, well, this really falls under the planning director, but the planning director is creating and managing the ordinances and making sure individuals up front follow that. He doesn't have time to go out and patrol the neighborhoods and drive up and down the streets, follow these complaints. And so I would hate to task another hat with that. It's really that part-time separate individual. And I like the comments of somebody that was former law enforcement, that not necessarily because they pack a gun, but they've had that interaction with the public who may not be law abiding, and so they know how to dissolve angry situations. Yes, and a lot of times you can imagine, and this is part of the difficulty with it, is they'll go and knock on a door and ask the individual that's opening the door, hey, do you own? Can I speak to the owner of the property? Well, it's going to be somebody here on vacation. It's like, well, no, I'm not the owner. Okay, who do you have listed as the owner? Could I get their contact information? And so some of this is going to be that follow-up work to find out, okay, yeah, they are an overnight rental, and I spoke to so-and-so out of California. Here's the owner. But then it's tracking down that individual that may reside in California, and following up with them and saying, hey, we see that you're operating this as overnight rental. And then with the attorney's assistance is applying that enforcement mechanism after that.
I have thought a lot about this since last meeting, because I thought, okay, we talked about maybe sending an officer there to check the noise or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just thinking the reaction of our officers trying just to make that trip. And I could figure out, how do we enforce this? Because if you don't enforce it, it's contagious. You move to town and say, well, look,
Yeah.
I'm making this much money. Well, what's the regulation? Oh, they don't enforce it. Well, I'll start my own business, and everybody starts. And
Yep.
So in a way, we are encouraging, because we don't have somebody
That's enforcing the side of it.
for that.
Mhm.
And if we don't have that, and we start assigning different people, we need somebody that just for that.
So
The
in my
other possibility is the department that does the business licensing. They kind of are doing that anyway, or supposed to be doing that anyway.
Yeah.
That's just an idea.
again, if that person, planner, business licensing, has the skill set we're talking about to roam the neighborhoods and talk, then I'm good with that. But my experience is the people who have that skill set is a fairly narrow group of people, and many I love them because I've worked in 24 years. I worked in local government after I retired from the Marine Corps, and I love all public employees, but some of them just don't have this skill set. So you want to get the right skill set. So I think there's an immediate need and there's a long-term need. So I mean, you're coming near the end of your fiscal cycle. Maybe this is part of the budget discussion for next year, but I don't think we can wait until January. I think you're going to have a short-term assignment and then look at it more holistically as part of the larger budget as you come up at the end of the year. So I'm not going to be in the middle of that. It's up to you guys to take care of that. What will happen fairly quickly, or as soon as we get some cases prepared, I'm going to transition from administrative law judge to code enforcement hearing officer, and I'll actually be having hearings here in this room. I'll come down here probably 1 or 2 days a month from Salt Lake, and we'll just start processing cases. But that can only happen after the case has been prepared and there's been a notice of summons from the county attorney's office and everything else like that. But I'm more than willing to come down here and do that. Once the cases, if I have a sense the cases aren't ready, then I don't want to be involved in it. I don't want to come down here and waste my time. So I want to make sure the cases are ready to go. One final note, and this is discussion that I've had with Mitch and Mac. An interesting enforcement tool that I found nationally involving short-term rentals is the International Fire Code. So the fire code looks at a single family home and assumes that that property is occupied by a family over a long period of time. If that structure is converted to transient use, the fire code changes. And there's some very specific fire code requirements that are probably not being met by any of these folks in these dwellings where there's transient activity. So I gathered some stuff together. I sent it to both Mac and Mitch. The fire chief needs to come up online and say, yes, these are the enforcement requirements, because it's interpreting the International Fire Code. They're just not there ready to cherry pick. You have to interpret it. But if the fire chief said these are fire code problems, you talked about fire being a problem. These are the requirements. Then the fire marshal department has amazing enforcement skills. They need to get reasonable notice, but within reasonable notice a day or two, they can show up at a door and walk in and start determining whether that facility complies with the fire code. And if it doesn't, they can immediately shut them down. So that's not part of all this other stuff. That's kind of a separate angle, but fire is sensitive to me. Every one of us, there's nobody in this room hasn't had a personal family circumstance where a fire hasn't affected us. And I'm not going to go into mine up in northern Minnesota, but the reality is fire is a big deal. And we want these properties, illegal or not, to be safe. And the only way you're going to make sure of that is to make sure that the code that you've adopted and we're expected to live by is enforced in those properties. So I think Mac and the attorney's office will work on that. I'm probably not going to be involved any more than just raising the possibility, but I think it's an important tool that you have to address any properties and any transient facilities, your hotels, your resorts, anything where there's got people coming and going, there's a fire code expectation. So. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Mitch, who's going to go back to the subdivision plat process. Any more questions for me?
Thank you.
You bet.
Before I start, I know Bart is online. Bart, do you have any comments so far?
Yeah, I just want to mention one thing. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. I just wanted to mention that, when we're talking about public nuisances, if there is something going on that presents sort of an imminent threat to safety or health or something like that, the the Utah code does allow the county's attorney's office just to directly go to district court and get an injunction or temporary restraining order that will allow them to immediately stop whatever it is that's presenting that danger. So there is that option also, and I just wanted to make sure that the county commission was aware of it.
So on the ordinance that could go to the planning commission, can we have that ready by Thursday to get to Mac, or will you need more time on that?
No, that will be fine.
Okay, all right.
Well, my presentation is fairly simple. I have gone through both the Utah Code and our subdivision ordinance and have come up with kind of a subdivision approval process. And it's fairly big undertaking, but you've got the handout here. I got this in rather late, but it goes through just a step-by-step process that I think if we had it, it's kind of been a checklist format. And there's a subdivision approval process that just tells us each and every step along the way of what we have to do. I think Bart has looked at this, and I just saw an email this morning from him that he said that he has a few comments or you know, that to go to a final version. So this isn't meant to be a final version, but I think maybe you can take a look at it, and it's got, you know, hopefully if we adopt this, it'll just make that process so much easier. With respect to, well, I know Lynn talked about putting restrictions on the plat. And I think the three of us argued somewhat, or not argued, but whether that should apply only to restrictions in the Spanish Valley, or should those restrictions also apply to the A1 zone, which would be anybody in the rest of the county that's trying to put up some short-term rentals. Whether we want those restrictions on the plat, but I think we decided that we'd go with both. I don't know how you feel about that. If you just want it to go in, I'm talking about the language that you brought up, Jamie, that would go on the plat in the residential zone down there. But I think we've also got it on any A1 zone for the rest of the rest of the county. I also prepared a warranty deed here with restrictions that if the property, so would kind of have it twofold, would have it on the plat map, but would actually have it as a recorded restrictive covenant. And that's in this presentation here. But I think what I would like to do is, you know, look at what Bart has, what comments he has on it, and get it in a final approval form, but if that's the way you guys want to go, and come back and present it to you. Go.
I have a question. Will this go also to the planning and zoning? So
Yes.
they can look at it too?
Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
Because they'd probably be the first ones to
Right.
go with that.
Yeah, and I think we'd get this on the schedule, the planning and zoning schedule, to
Thank you.
present this to them, if you guys see fit.
So there's one of the things that's been missing this whole time, that as now I get to enact some of this as that role. We've never had a subdivision application, and that's one of the things that you could put this as an exhibit to that application, because it really, you know, as I look out at some other counties, Garfield County, for example, they have exactly this type of a checklist that kind of gives staff, but probably more importantly, the public, the knowledge that you've got to have all of this.
Yeah.
we've taken subdivision plats before planning commission and commission in the past where they haven't had all of this information. Now it's already in our ordinance that they have to have it, but we've been omitting those items, and so
It's a good work list too, because
Absolutely.
I had to
Yeah,
be this and this and this.
kind of
and-
step by step.
yes, yeah, and it
Yeah.
gives the public the
Yeah.
expectation is this is what we're going to need before
Yeah.
we.
And it saves time because I come to the planning and zoning committee and sometimes, we are stuck on certain things, but if the people ahead, that I had to have this and this, it
Yep.
would be more
Yeah.
smooth moving.
And I think this is meant for the zoning administrator.
It is.
subdivision.
Yep.
Yeah.
He can look at. Good.
I don't think this needs to be adopted by ordinance. They could just adopt it as a policy procedure. Or do you want it in ordinance?
Well, he's saying that we could do it, that we could adopt it as a ordinance, or we could just do it as procedure. I don't know what.
To me, I think it's more for procedure. We should have already had the application. This is just part of
Well,
the
it's 'cause
application
this is
side of
kind
it.
The application. in
Yes,
and of itself.
yeah.
Yeah, the state code and your own code actually authorize this.
Correct.
It's already there.
It's already there.
So I think
All this
my
is
recommendation
formalizing
don't go
it.
through an ordinance. Don't
I agree.
just adopt it as a procedure. The commission is going to recommend that the chief administrative officer
Yeah, go
follow
forward
this,
with it.
and you don't have to go through the public notice
Public
process
hearing.
and all the
Yeah,
rest of that. You
these are already in our
but the
ordinances
planning
now.
commission should weigh in, and then you guys take a look at it, and if you're good with it, you just take a vote, and it's now an operational procedure for the county. That would be.
Yeah. Bart, do you have any other additional comments?
No, I agree with what Lynn just said on the procedural approach to this.
Okay.
And then you've seen my comments, or you will see my comments that I got you this morning.
Yeah. So with your permission, I would like to maybe bring this back for the next work meeting with just have a final version, and we could adopt it hopefully.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank
Good.
you so much.
You bet.
Helpful, very helpful. Is that all you had, Mitch, for?
I think that's it.
Mitch, on one of them, on the San Juan County Street Design Standards, Commissioner Adams and myself and TJ Adair, Road Department, we've talked about kind of beefing this up to a little bit more so that our standards are also inclusive of the design portion as well. So try to give in booklet form the whole entirety of what a road means, and how much aggregate, all of that information right up front. So I'm wondering if it makes sense at this time to add to that as well. Obviously, we had talked about reaching out, and TJ's looking at other counties, how they've done this as well. As it would, I think we're at that point in time in our county that we need to be more prescriptive with our roads and tell them exactly the developer side of it. This is what it looks like. Now you talk about when we go into the subdivision side of it, if it's private property, we're going to require a recorded maintenance agreement. I've already pushed that out. It's already in our ordinance. So any subdivision plat that's come across my desk is like, I need this maintenance agreement as well, so that there is never any question, whether or not this is a private road or going to be a public road in the future. But also what is questioning from the developers is like, well, what does this road look like? What does that mean that I've got to meet county standards? Is it 6 inches of base? What is that aggregate? And what does that look like? And so I'd like to beef this up with TJ's help to get a more complete package of exactly what our roads were. And I think, when we look at these developers coming in, there was one property that we looked at last week that's clear off the grid. It takes a D road to get to this subdivision. Well, if that D road is incapacible, if you cannot transfer or you cannot use that route during the winter, then what are we doing? And so it's taking this, adding a little bit more weight to it and requirements. If you're going to develop off the grid, we're going to require this D road to be at a condition where people can get in and out. I mean, I've got communities that are coming into the county now that have developed, in their subdivision, and it's not even a county route, but that developer, they came in and put the road in. It's clay, pure clay. But now I've got mothers trying to drive their kids to school outside of Blanding to try to get down this clay hill in the middle of the wintertime. She's like, I can't. She's like, I can't get my kids down to the street, and they're coming to the county to solve the problem. Like, well, this is a private road. This is really your issue. We really don't have a lot we can do. I can put you in touch with our contractors, but outside of that, this is a private road. But if we were to approve these type of standards, telling them that these are the roads that are required to get into your subdivision, if it's not that, you're going to have to upgrade it. And I know it's going to be a cost on the developer, but these are private roads, and this is the requirement that we have for a private road.
Right. Yeah, I will get with TJ, and
Okay.
maybe me and you and TJ can settle on something we all like.
Okay, good.
And I think that'd be helpful because what happened, they come and develop, they leave, people buy the property, they decide to sell, and a new buyer had no idea.
Absolutely.
And then what happened with us, we get an email, when it's snowing and they're stuck, I get emails telling me all the time, I need help here, help there. Now realize that we had to take care first of the main roads and then and so I think then people buy with the knowledge that
Right.
the county it's
Yeah.
not required to clean up my road or to
Yeah.
make sure I take my children to school.
And in this as well, I think, and I don't know if we've been doing this, but they've got to come in with a cost estimate and put up a proposal.
See, we have not.
And I think, and then we retain that for a year.
Yeah.
And when it's past its final inspection, then we give it back. But I think
Yeah.
that will help as well. So
I think so
there's
too.
a lot in here that we haven't been doing, that we need to be doing.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank
I like
you.
that. And then the maintenance agreement, I think the maintenance agreement for me where it's recorded, I mean, we've never really had them record this document, but I think that's also critical to those future home buyers that they can fall back when this was subdivided. There's the maintenance agreement that says you own 1/3 of the road or 1/4 of the road, and all of us conglomerately need to maintain this private road. And so I think that'll help.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, he has a question.
Go ahead.
Commissioner, I just wanted to share some irony. Wondering if Mac's spending too much time on the reservation because now he's starting to sound like BIA.
Okay, I think that's the end of our agenda for our work meeting, so we'll take a break until 10 o'clock, and then we'll start our commission.
Yep.
11 o'clock.
So 11.
11 o'clock, I'm sorry.
Did they want to say something?
Who?
Them? Or they're
No.
11? They're 11.
They're not on the agenda.
Oh, okay.